G'day everyone, it's Coach Michelle J Raymond back again for another episode in our series that is designed to help marketers get the most out of 2025 without having to figure it out for themselves. And today we're going to be talking about B2B content marketing trends. There's a new report that's come out, and so I've called back a friend of the show, Robert Rose. Welcome back. Let's get into this.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad to be here.
I found it very interesting in our pre-show chat that you and I are having very similar experiences with our clients. So before we get into that, how does the B2B content marketing benchmark, budgets, and trends report come together?
It came together very early when we first started Content Marketing Institute, when Joe and I were talking with our then very small team, talking about trying in the way to track what was going on with content marketing, and especially in the B2B world. And it was all then a very brand new thing. And then over the years, we've just changed and modified, updated, massaged the questions and the surveys to keep track with everything that's going on. For example, this year, of course, we have questions around artificial intelligence and all of the things that are going on around automation and all of that. And it's just been a nice place to be able to take the temperature of what's going on in B2B marketing for the last 15 years.
It's kind of crazy because when I was flicking through the report, there was lots of surprises for me, and then some other parts where I was a bit not surprised because it reflects the conversations that I'm having with marketers, especially those in small marketing teams. They are the ones that I think right now, coming into the end of the year, possibly feeling a bit frustrated that they didn't tick everything off they wanted to achieve, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed. The AI and tech, we're going to talk about that because I think that had a big impact. I'm not sure whether that went for the positive or the negative, so I'd love to go into that a little bit more.
Sure.
But for you, what stood out to you in this report compared to some of those previous ones?
I will tell you, and it's what I wrote this in a long LinkedIn post and as well as in the body of the report itself, which is the remarkability of this was in its unremarkability. And this came up as we also just finished Content Marketing World as well, where what we're seeing now is a trend of a flat line of mediocrity. And what I mean there is that B2B marketers right now, and this has been true really since the pandemic, we haven't seen any surprising ups or downs of this in the last 4 years, but have basically said, hey, we're creating content that we feel like is okay. It's meeting our needs okay. We're not terribly happy about it and we're not terribly sad about it. And so it was 50, I think it was 58% is the number of those that feel like they're having success, some level of success. So it's a little more than half, right, that feel like that their content is good, right? And then another 50% half feel like that their overall success, like they're succeeding. And so you take all these sort of very sort of average top of the bell curve results together, which have been the same for the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And what I think it points to is the fact that we are now in a situation where B2B content marketing, and you could actually apply this across the board, just B2B marketing full stop, is in sort of an identity crisis, right? We are in this situation where we have become more and more busy, doing more and more, optimizing the mundane, as I've been saying, right? We are using technology to tweak one more search result, to tweak one more percentage point of conversion rate, to change it from a lighter shade of blue to a deeper shade of blue to see if it gets one more click than we possibly can, to look for that data in a silo that's not quite there and we can't have access to it because this team says we can't have access to it. Reorganizing for the 10th time because the new CMO has come in and is reorganizing us into pods or to groups or to new teams or moving product marketing out of something where else. The CMS isn't fully implemented. The marketing automation system isn't fully implemented. And we're in this sort of rinse and repeat cycle of mundane activities in marketing. And we've reached this peak technology button pushing. And we're not doing the innovative, we're not doing the interesting, and we're not doing anything. So what we've successfully done is we've gotten marketing to be extremely efficient. And we've also simultaneously made it much less joyful and much less interesting.
It's been interesting for me to have conversations with experts. And I had LinkedIn insider Robin O'Connell come a couple of weeks ago, and he was just sharing that the term that LinkedIn use it based out of all their research is B2 boring. And the creativity has disappeared, no level of risk taking and no emotions in any of the content that goes out. You look at a post and it could be from one of your competitors, and very few people are doing anything that really stands out. And it's fine. It's okay. It's not bad, like your research showed. There's nothing wrong with it. But is it working? I would question that. And I think that's the thing I'm hoping out of today's conversation, that we can inspire some of the marketers that are listening to say, you know what, I'm really frustrated with how these things are happening. I'm going to give something new a go. It's time that I'm going to stand up and have my voice heard to say, this isn't working. I want to try this. And I'm hoping that we can, encourage some listeners, because I know that it's not easy in corporate land to just, make what feels like a monumental shift. But the risk, I think, is definitely worth the reward. Is there anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think you've said it very well. And I think when we start looking at, and we can certainly look at some of the specifics that we might speak to, but I think overall, it's not that the marketers are less creative. Let's be clear. Whenever I go visit with a client or teach a class or anything like that, it's not that they lack creativity or lack the desire to do some interesting things. It's that they're in a space where there just is no bandwidth to be able to do those things, right? And you're so right. It's like they work okay. So in other words, it becomes easier and more efficient to just check a box and get the ads out, get the blog post out, get the ebook out, check it. And we've done it this way for the last 10 years. We have this budget associated with that. There's just no reason, because we're so afraid that, the hammer is going to come down. There's no reason to step out on a limb and do something weird or something strangely creative or something that is completely brand new, because the risk reward is we could fail. And if we fail, then we've failed incrementally, not even failed spectacularly. Like we've just failed incrementally, and therefore we'll be out of a job or we'll be fired or we won't get our bonus or whatever the risk reward is. So as leaders in the organization, I think one of the key things they have to do is sort of open up the box of creativity again, to let it fly, let that creativity out of the box if you want to create competitive advantage and be differentiated out there. Because the incremental stuff is great. It's fine. We know that has to get done. But we have to have room in our lives and in our teams' lives and in our businesses' lives to do interesting things. Otherwise, why are we in business to begin with?
I think the $1 million word that you use there is differentiated. I think that should be the word of 2025, how you get there. I'm not holding on to any one type of outcome that listeners should be using. But I do know that if they don't find a way to differentiate themselves from their competition and from all the other noise on the platforms, and in this case, we mostly talk about LinkedIn on this, but it can be anywhere. But I just wonder, and in the research, what was the biggest challenge for B2B marketers that you found? Is it this resourcing issue where we're trying to do too much, spread too thin, and not doing anything very well, but keeping up? Or is it more the strategy that sits behind the content? If you've listened to my podcast, you know that Metricool is my go-to social media management platform. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome, and let me introduce you to this fabulous tool. Metricool has plans to suit everybody, including a completely free plan that you can manage one brand across social channels, analyze your results, and plan your content accordingly. But today, I want to talk about the tiered premium plans, and they are tailored toward businesses and creator goals at a reasonable price. Some of the amazing premium features that are available across the plans are the fact that Metricool makes managing multiple brands simple. It's all in one place. But my favorite part is that you can connect multiple LinkedIn accounts that are both personal or company pages. You can also analyze up to 100 competitors to benchmark your performance. And a recent new release, which is making a big difference, is that you can connect your Google Drive and Canva and really streamline your content planning. downloadable analytics reports that you can automate monthly, make life easy, and there is just so much more. So if you are looking to organize your social media content, make more informed marketing decisions, and scale your online presence, well, Metricool is a must. But don't just take my word for it. Give it a go for yourself and see how Metricool can make your life easier. Listeners, I've got a special offer just for you. Go to the show notes, look for the link to create a free account today, and then you can use the code Michelle30 to try any premium plan for free for the next 30 days. And you can thank me later.
You've got it. You've nailed it. That's 1 and 2 from a self-reported perspective, right? When we ask what's the bigger challenge that you're facing right now, lack of resources is number 1. But honestly, it's like, okay, I believe that a little bit, right? The lack of resources, but I have too much money and too much time on my hands, said no marketing person ever in the history of marketing. Resources are always going to be an issue, right? That's just the way marketing is. And so when I see the number 1 challenge being stated as lack of resources, what that tells me is we have filled our marketers' days with the wrong activities, right? We're filling them with some kind of activities that aren't as productive or innovative or interesting as we could. And so then I go, okay, what's the number 2? And then it's lack of strategy, which just bolsters that argument, right? Because the number 2 is we don't have a clear objective or a clear strategy when it comes to our content marketing in B2B. And that just comes from because what we're doing is we're copy and pasting from last year, right? Where all we're doing is saying, what were we supposed to do last year that we didn't get done? And so that becomes this year's strategy is literally, well, here are the 14 things. It's this weird, interesting trend that I see with so many companies where you get into this fix it or maintenance mode and you say to yourself, you rationalize, the business rationalizes to itself and says, we'll spend the third quarter getting out of this hole, right? We'll get out of this hole of technology and the challenges with the implementation of the CMS and the DAM system, and we'll get the email thing up and running again, and nobody can figure out the workflow for that, and Asana isn't quite working right, and all those kinds of things. And we say, we'll use the third quarter, and then so we spend the third quarter in that maintenance mode. Fourth quarter comes around and we go, great, we're done that, but so many other maintenance things have backed up in the meantime. So now we have to spend the fourth quarter in a whole new set of maintenance mode. And so we get to 2025 or the new year or whatever it is, and it's like, there's just so many things backed up from the year previous that we didn't get to. Now we have to spend 2025 doing that. So all the growth programs, and I'm using rock and roll quotes there for anybody who's not watching a video on this, but basically any growth programs get put to the wayside because we're too busy trying to figure out how to fix what we broke last year. And that is this endless cycle. So we just have to stop the cycle.
That's tricky. I mean, you work with businesses as a fractional CMO, so you're getting in the weeds with them to try and figure this out.
Yeah.
If you were to walk into a business today that is listening to this podcast, and we've probably got marketers out there nodding their head going, I know, I hear you, I'm trying. Where do you think they can start with this? If it's chicken and egg, do we start with strategy first? I tend to go that way. But do we have to free up some time? I don't know which one is actually practically out there in the real world going to make the biggest difference.
As you know very well, strategy and strategic objectives is the place to start, because without that, as I like to say, a strategy without a plan is having a wish list, and a plan without a strategy is having a map with nowhere to go. So you have to have a place to go. You have to have a place that you're heading. But the first tactical thing that I usually would recommend to most teams is we have to start asking ourselves the hard questions of what I call starting a stopping list, like things we just have to stop doing. And those things may have had every reason for us to do them. A common one that I find is we've got 4 newsletters. Why do we have 4 newsletters? Because so-and-so needed a newsletter, then the product people wanted a newsletter, then somebody else wanted a newsletter. It's great. What's the difference between the 4 of them? I don't know. They're just 4 newsletters. So you go, okay, what if we cut 3 of them and we combine those into one, and we stop worrying about how to maintain 3 other newsletters? What would we do with that time? So starting that stopping list and not just replacing it with other things, right, that are in maintenance mode, saying, let's build ourselves some headroom so that we're not 110% accounted for in our weekly activities and not fill it with anything. It's easy to fill it with more busy work, and just make a very conscious choice to not fill that empty space with something so that we can take that strategic plan and actually go, here's a bet we want to make in marketing. Here's a new website, a new resource center, a new LinkedIn strategy, a new social media strategy, a new approach to how we're doing content with AI, whatever that thing is, we want to make it a thing. You know, one of the most common question I get asked is by a CEO or a CMO is, how do I make content marketing strategy a thing in our business? And my first response is, make somebody responsible for it. Right? I don't care who, make somebody responsible for it. Because when we walk around and we try and make everybody responsible, a little bit responsible for this and a little bit responsible for that, and do this in your side time, do this when you don't have anything else to do, of course nothing happens, because of course we never have that time. But if you make somebody responsible for it, time, budget, effort, metrics, KPIs, now all of a sudden it's a thing and people will get it done.
A very practical add-on to what you've just shared is it's time to start blocking time in your calendars and making this a priority so that you actually allocate time out of your week, your month, your quarter to sit down and work on this kind of stuff. Because I feel like it's this, I'll get to that after I've had all my other meetings and everybody's dragged me this way, that way. I've, produced what everybody else wanted. There is no time physically set aside in a calendar. And so it can be a really practical step to say, this is when we will get together, have it planned out for the whole year, and it becomes part of your process. But I feel like if it's not there as an action item with a real amount of time allocated to it, you are dreaming that it's going to happen. How do I know this? One, because partly it happens in my own business, and I'm only a business of 2, so I don't have teams to coordinate. I don't have other departments to try and negotiate with. But if I look back in corporate land, my calendar was jam-packed from the time I started till the time I went home and afterwards some days, with back-to-back meetings. In my case, I was in sales, so it was customer visits, back to the office, back here, back there. And I'm sure that marketers are going through the same thing because everybody wants a piece of them. And so make some time for yourself. This is your permission slip out of this podcast to go and actually put a priority on this for your own self so that you can feel like you're achieving these things.
Yeah. I'll give you one other very quick practical tip, which is a great place to start, which is most companies that we deal with, the way they look at content is by container instead of the content itself, the story that we want to tell, or the thought leadership, or whatever the idea that we want to express is. In other words, our first thing is to say, how are we going to get all these PDFs done? How are we going to get all these landing pages done? How are we going to get all these social posts done? How are we going to get all these emails out the door? And so you look at them as containers. And so when we, as humans, we look at all those containers and we go, great, that's the list of to-dos, is the containers. And we go, okay, the second list of to-dos is, what are all the ideas that need to fill those containers? And so and then it becomes overwhelmingly busy, right? We become overwhelmingly busy trying to fill all those containers with interesting ideas. Instead of just taking one part of that meeting that you just said, that one part where you plan everything out and going, yeah, we have, over the next 6 months, we do have 14 emails we need to get out the door, and 3 white papers and 2 ebooks and this 14 landing pages and this campaign's content and all that. What one idea could fill all of that? Let's pick one idea. Like, slow down. And this is going to sound completely wrong, but if you slow down the content creation process, I promise you, you will exponentially multiply your production, asset creation, container process. So slow down to speed up.
No pushback from me on that one. It's a high five. A ditto from me. Now, let's look at 2024. We have to talk about marketing tech and what's happened, because
Sure.
it feels like it's really been center of attention, the world's biggest explosion in this particular area when it comes to things that are impacting marketers. And with all these new tools available, is it really helping marketers achieve their goals? Is that what the report found when you were asking marketers, help or hindrance? Where are we at?
AI has sucked all the oxygen out of the room, right? That is clear, to the frustration of many of the other technology providers that are out there that are providing very useful, very handy, and very productive tools that have been around for years. They're off in the corner going, hi, remember us? We're actually the ones like doing good stuff. And you're trying to figure out how to throw more AI spaghetti against the wall and get something useful out of it. And so AI is the sexiest thing that nobody's doing. It is experimental at best, and everybody is doing it on their own, right? Either because of IT policies, legal policies, whatever it is, and larger organizations, smaller organizations, just because we don't know how to organize it across the team. So everybody goes off on their own and plays with ChatGPT, plays with Claude, plays with some tool, and then comes back and reports and says, well, here's how it either, and it's usually one of two extremes, right? It's either this is how it's going to fundamentally change my life for the better, which is probably not true, but okay. And then the other one is here's how it's completely useless and I can't absolutely use it, which is also probably not true. So a much more discerned approach to AI is needed. Having said that, from a technology perspective, most of it is because what we find is that it is seen as a challenge mostly because we have become so specialized, right? Marketing itself, in a very similar way, I wrote about this a while back, not in a dissimilar way to medicine, like healthcare, how specialized. And like, when was the last time you went to a general doctor? You just don't go to the general doctor anymore, right? You go to a specialist. And so marketing in a very similar way is becoming so specialized around the idea of technology and how we manage things like web content, email automation, social media content, analytics, data, first-party data, second-party data, media buying. All of that is technology platform delivered, which is ultimately expert-level systems. And so what you end up with are marketing teams or marketing people who are good at Hootsuite, or they're good at HubSpot, or they're good at Salesforce, and bring them into another environment and I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so that's a real challenge with technology, is how specialized it has become in marketing and how much specialization we need to actually manage things. The outcome of that is that we typically don't implement technology to its fullest extent. And so that's what has to change, is that we have to get good at the technology we have before we start adding technology that we're not even good at yet.
I wonder if this is driven by this concept that seemed to be out there. And I fell into the same trap when I started my own business, that you had to be everywhere on every platform. You had to have a newsletter. You had to have website, up and running and SEO optimized.
No kidding.
And I started trying to do that myself in my own business and learned very, very quickly that I was on a highway to nowhere. I was going to burn myself out. I absolutely hated it. I was like, why am I on Instagram? I've never used Instagram. I don't enjoy being on Instagram and Twitter at the time before it turned into X. And I was like, I never liked these. I like LinkedIn and I like YouTube and podcasts. Like, why am I trying to do everything? Is there a certain compulsion out there that if you're not everywhere, there's something wrong with your business? Are we scared that we're going to miss out on something?
Not to put too fine a point on it, my friend, but there are people like you and I out there who are saying the exact opposite, right? They are saying, they're out there going, you got to be everywhere. You got to be omni-channel. You have to be omnipresent. You have to be on every platform. You have to be doing things everywhere all the time, everything all at once and out there. Cough, Gary V, cough, right? And so you've got these people who are out there giving, I think, bad advice for marketers about where they are building their value. What are they investing in? What are they truly investing in? I don't care how big your marketing team is, you can't be everywhere. I've seen the biggest companies on the planet can't be everywhere in a meaningful way, right? In a meaningful way. Sure, you could be there in a copy and paste way, but as we've talked about before, even on this show, now when it comes to social media, and there's been a real resurgence, I would say, of organic social media in terms of efficacy in marketing, especially in B2B. But it doesn't mean you can no longer just simply do things like take a headline, put in an abstract, post, and expect good results, right? You have to deliver that value in the post. You have to design that content for LinkedIn, for Instagram, for Facebook, for your website, for that partner website, for the blog. And content has to be designed in a very specific way, and that just takes time. And so picking your battles, picking where you want to play is such an important piece of a marketing strategy these days. And you do not have to be everywhere.
That is your permission slip. We've given people so many permission slips in this episode. I think it's important because I think there is almost this, you're the marketing manager, thou shalt keep up with everything and be everywhere. And I think about how much effort it takes me just to stay up to date with everything on LinkedIn. I have my podcast and YouTube as well, but LinkedIn's my predominant platform. That keeps me busy 24/7. So I always have so much empathy for the marketers out there that are literally trying to be experts across everything. So yeah, slowing down to speed up, I am definitely on board with as well. As we come around to the end of this episode, which has been fabulous and given so much practical and tactical advice to marketers that might be listening, I've got one more question for you, which I love to round out the show with. What is the best tip that you can give content marketers as they head into 2025 that you think will make the biggest difference to them being successful and having some kind of step change rather than this same old that we've seen in previous years?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two because they're related to each other, which is one, what we were just talking about, which is I think there's a real renaissance happening now, especially on places like LinkedIn and other third-party websites. This is B2B specific, other third-party places. So your partners, influencers, people in this space that have an audience, where they're aggregating that audience, and be judicious about the ones you pick, but designing content experiences specifically for those. I don't love the fact that LinkedIn is rented land and we have to put so much investment there, but it's where things are now. It's where things are. And there's so much success happening there if you do it well. But that means taking a much more considered approach to LinkedIn and those third-party sites than just literally saying, here's a clever clickbait headline and an abstract and an image and a link. Way to go. You probably won't even link at all. You probably won't link to your website at all. Maybe you do so in the first comment. Maybe you don't, whatever it is. But it's designing value at the edges is what we call it. The second is, okay, where does that leave owned media? And I really do believe that 25 is going to be a bit of a renaissance for owned media. We just saw this last week, SEMrush acquired Search Engine Land. They acquired Search Marketing Expo, which is an event and a website. So clearly they're making a big bet on owned media for 25. I believe that if you can create digital scarcity and you can create an awesome user experience. Salesforce just launched their Sales Blazer community. There's a whole bunch of examples of this, of new owned media, thought leadership, engagement, and education, and all kinds of platforms. I think 2025 is the time to invest again in something extraordinary. Swing for the fences, do something interesting on your owned media. Forget your website as much, but create something truly interesting where your customers want to spend time, and you can build an audience there.
I love it. And I think differentiation is going to be key to success as far as heading into that new year. I think it's a word that's going to just keep coming up and up. And I hope that it does, because I think that's going to be more important than people getting stuck on which AI tool or, 100%. What's going to be the latest, hottest type of LinkedIn content and things like that. What I think people should be mindful of going into 2025 with all of what we've just spoken about, you need to understand the demographic shift that's happening on LinkedIn. So we're going into 65% of LinkedIn is Gen Z, right? So fastest growing
that's amazing.
Demographic on the platform. What they like, enjoy, consume, and expect is very different to other generations. They want to know what you stand for. They want things that are different and relate and build communities. I think it's really important to be mindful of that. I read some research from the Top Employers Institute around how Gen Z will be in the workforce, and they're going to make up roughly 30% of the workforce. So if you don't think that this is going to impact where you're at, think again, because that is exactly why LinkedIn's just introduced the video feed. So be mindful of some of these things. But yeah, I really am planning, and I've got my fingers crossed for all of the listeners out there that this has inspired them. It's certainly inspired me to find my way to differentiate myself. Like, I'm not immune to this. I have to find my own way to do it as well. So I'm looking forward to challenging myself to come up with those answers. So Robert, I'm going to drop the details of the report so people can dive into it and for themselves. I really appreciate you coming back on the show, and I hope you'll come back again one time in the future.
Anytime you want me, I'm here.
Excellent. Until next week, listeners, cheers.